Hello and welcome to another episode of Entrepreneur TV. It's another great show today. I can tell you why, because I've had the chance of speaking to the guest who is all in the field of doing disability aids. Now, it's maybe something that you're maybe not thinking of at the moment, but if you're lucky enough, we will get to an age where maybe we require them, or maybe we have those loved ones around us that need good support or assistance, or maybe you want to go into the industry. Well, we have an industry leader. His name is Alastair from TPG. Thank you so much for coming in. You've come a long way.
My pleasure. Yeah, it's a long way from Hereford to Grimsby, but I was very glad to make the journey to come and see you.
I tell you, people are going to be astounded, I think, at your company today. You really do move mountains to make things happen. But I just want to know, I think it was around about 40 years ago, was it was started?
You're absolutely right. Now is our 40th anniversary. The origination started with mother and father. The TPG Disabled Aids is Tony and Pam Gibbs, which are my mum and dad. The current generation are myself and my sister that are in the business, and my niece is also following on behind. So it's very much a family thing of the third generation. Mum and dad are still going well. They're still out there and actually enjoying the benefits of the products very often. So we started back in 1985 when Dad was made pretty much redundant from the agricultural industry. He'd seen an opportunity as an introduction through Mum's brother. There was a company that they designed and developed a level access shower tray, and that kind of just made it an interesting thing to do some research on. Mm-hmm. He did some research in our area, in the region in and around Hereford, and found that there wasn't anybody supplying aids for the elderly and disabled. So made a few inquiries with social services and the local hospitals and that type of thing, and we found that there was an opening, or Dad found there was an opening, and so he's always been very entrepreneurial in the first instance, and he seized that opportunity to go out and promote this level access shower tray with a pump out waste, and it went really well, and found that there were lots of other pieces of equipment that were required. Stair lifts in particular, mobility equipment, wheelchairs and scooters. A lot of that equipment, of course, in the early 80s was very much in its infancy.
Yes.
It was not at all refined, and it was not at all as polished as it is perhaps today. And there were a lot of similarities, one could argue, with the agricultural industry.
I was just about to say, he took the clunky equipment and he used the agricultural brain.
Absolutely right. And I think that would always been his argument as an engineer at heart, that it's the same set of spanners, the same set of screwdrivers, and if needs be, the same hammers to make things work.
Yeah.
And you can apply good engineering principles across all manner of equipment. And to apply it to disabled equipment was actually an incredibly satisfying occupation.
Yeah.
You were making a difference to people's lives.
Very rewarding, I would imagine.
Very much so. He started, like I said, in 1985. Within a few years, realised that it was going to be too much for him, and so needed help. He started employing on a daily basis maybe one or two electricians or handymen to come and help him do the heavy stuff. At the time, I was a telephone engineer working for British Telecom.
I was going to say, there is on the list there, you worked for BT.
I did, and I'd left school, done an apprenticeship, so I had some good training there. But at age, I think it was 26, they told me that I was then too old to progress with any further within BT. And on further sort of inquiries, it was because I didn't have a degree. But of course, it's not possible to do an apprenticeship and do a degree at the same time. You're either working through the apprenticeship and getting the experience, or you're doing the studying. And that was not appreciated by that corporation at the time. And so Dad was in real need of assistance, and I then with one babe in arms and another one on the way, and a mortgage kind of up to here. And I'm thinking, what if I do? I'm leaving what is such a secure job for life. But I felt I could offer more than being stuck at BT at the level that I was. for the rest of my days.
Did that leap actually, because I often ask this from entrepreneurs, they go from a secure job to something very unsecure in a lot of respects.
Very much was, yes.
How do you sort of cope with that on a day-to-day basis?
I think it's total commitment. You cannot half-heartedly go into that type of scenario where previously you knew that your mortgage was covered and all that sort of stuff, to jump into this and you just commit. And it was from 7 a.m. till perhaps 9 at night, and it was 7 days a week. And the number of times my wife used to say to me, are you in this marriage or are you in that business? Because you do have to commit. And I didn't see my children grow up for the first few years of their life because I was totally committed to making the business work. And unfortunately, I think that's what a lot of youngsters starting out in business lives nowadays don't see. No. They see maybe the trappings of what's been produced over 40 years and the size that the business has grown to through astute planning and corporate sort of principles. But they want that at day one. And yes. You don't necessarily see. And I always remember, my colleagues at BT saying, "Oh, you go self-employed, you can have holidays whenever you like, you can go and play golf left, right, and centre, you can do all of this sort of stuff." I didn't have a holiday at all for the first probably 8 to 9 years.
And did they see you working till midnight and gone beyond, and beyond, and all your weekends?
And that's right. And rather sadly, you kind of get into that culture. And I think even now I don't take holidays. My wife takes holidays. She thoroughly enjoys them without me, but that's fine.
Well, I'm glad you do.
She's off to Bali next week to meet one of my sons. Now lives and works in Bali. He's a hairdresser, and I often say there wasn't a lot to do at home. So yeah, he's been out there sort of 12 years now, I think.
My stepson lives in Bali, and it is a beautiful place. I'm sure she's going to enjoy it. But yes. While she's enjoying the Bali sunshine,
I can then work.
You've got to work.
Yeah.
Do you still love, that's the thing, you've obviously came into the business, and although it was established with your father, I would feel that you've put your own stamp on it now.
Oh, without a doubt. And I think that was one of the things. It was really important that I'd gone and worked elsewhere for a number of years before coming back into the business, because then you can bring other experiences. Mm. If you have only ever worked within a family business, you only have in your knowledge bank what you've been taught by your parents or grandparents. It was important to bring other things in. And having had a good apprenticeship training and good engineering knowledge in a slightly different field to the agricultural engineering, that was something that I could bring to the business. And we looked at all sorts of other things that we could then add strings to the bow, if you like. It wasn't just stairlifts, it wasn't just showers. There were lots of other lifting and hoisting equipment, mobility equipment, beds, pressure care. There's lots and lots of elements to it that allowed me to sort of go out and explore those and bring them into the business. Added to which, I felt that I needed to go further with further education, which Father likewise was very committed to, and sort of freed me up some time to go and do further education in business to make sure that we didn't make any mistakes, or the mistakes that we made now were really relevant, because whilst you're employed, of course, you can make mistakes, and you're making mistakes with other people's money. Yes. When you're self-employed, it's your own business. It's your own money that you're making the mistakes with, and you learn those lessons really, really quickly.
But it's quite funny because even I'll give you an example. A chef that I know said he actually trained, as well as being in catering and chefing, he actually trained as a fully qualified accountant.
Absolutely right, yes. And I remember that my tutor in the business studies giving me some advice very early on, and he said, you can never do everything yourself. No. And you should line up your suppliers almost like a beauty parade, and you take the one you like the look of the most. So there'll be a number of accountants, there'll be a number of insurance brokers, there'll be a number of other professionals, lawyers, etc. And you just need to work with the people that you have the right culture with. You can't necessarily buy friends, but you can work with people that you like. Yes. And you often get a far better relationship. And certainly that is the case. Our insurance broker, our solicitors, we've worked with them almost from the beginning. and it's important to know they're on your side.
Got
and
trust.
They've got your back, because they'll look out for you to look out and do things properly, but also give you that support and guidance where you need it in a professional manner, that you can't possibly know everything yourself.
No. Now, the one thing that I do like is the amount of staff you've got. You've got a good amount now, from those early days with Dad to now around about 55, is it?
Yeah, it's around 55 staff now. It's been very much a grow within our own capabilities, within our own speed, if you like, so that some of those staff have now been with us over 30 years. And they're in the same culture. The whole culture is, there's no toxicity. It's all about working together as an extended family almost.
Yes.
And that family ethos works well. I just blame Mother. She didn't have enough children. It would have been so much easier. Yeah. And occasionally on the recruiting market, you do find some that say they can do all sorts of things. You bring them on board, and maybe the sort of way in which they hold themselves isn't quite as you would like, and they don't always stay that long. Likewise, we take on apprentices every year, and we at least one, sometimes two. And as much as I'd always like them to stay, they don't always stay.
No.
They always think the grass is greener someplace else. Some find that it's not and come back again, which is even more satisfying. I
would imagine.
We have no end of staff that have gone off and looked at other jobs, worked elsewhere, and then within less than a year have turned around and come back and said, please, I've made a mistake, can I come back and stay back in with the team? And that's really quite nice. That's a real sort of big tick for me, to know that we're doing it right. And we've certainly had, with our local tech college, the Apprentice of the Year, I think, on 3 separate occasions.
Well done, you.
So, yeah, I think we invest. Again, I think perhaps I started my life as an apprentice. I know my father did as well. And we understand that somebody's got to give you a start in life. You can't just all of a sudden pick off the shelf a fully qualified engineer and think they're going to be able to do everything that you want them to do, or a fully qualified salesperson that's going to do everything. You need to give people a chance and train them in the way you want them trained.
And I think that's the benefit of what you're doing with apprenticeships, because I see a lot of schools, they'll teach you the algebra, the English, the science, but if a child isn't moulded that way and not wired that way, I know my 2 boys, they're not academic, but they're practical.
Yes.
So they love doing things with their hands. They love being hands-on with people and situations. And what you're doing is you're nurturing that's brigade
right.
of people.
That's absolutely right. I think when we look for these apprentices at the beginning, we look for the culture, the way in which they hold themselves, the way in which they sort of try, and often I don't want to go and advertise. If there's somebody that's got the initiative, they'll come and find us.
Yes,
they'll come and find us to do that. And then, of all things, I think the last one was serving as a waitress in a Chinese restaurant. Hated every minute of it, but was actually prepared to knuckle down and do something rather than sit at home and say, well, the world owes me a job. He actually got on and did something, and approached one of my managers whilst he was in that restaurant and said, have you got any apprenticeships going? Because I really want to do engineering.
I like that.
It was ideal, because that shows that he's got the initiative.
Yes.
He's got the drive to want to do something, but he's not prepared to just sit there and do nothing until that happens. It's been an interesting way. We talk about training.
Oh, your training. I'm coming on to this now, because your training is, I have seen companies and they train their employees, but my goodness, they get the whole package. It's an academy.
And rightfully so. At the end of the day, we all only pass this way once, and it's only right that we should give these opportunities to those that choose to come and work with us. And I say with us, not for us, because it is a team. And certainly there's this culture, as I always said, that if I was stood in front of a client, maybe looking at their stair lift that wasn't working, and I was scratching my head because I didn't understand how to fix it, that's embarrassing. It would be embarrassing for me as it would be for one of my engineers, perhaps. It's not fair on the client, because they're maybe paying by the hour for somebody that actually doesn't know what they need to do to fix it. So I should train them well, and there's benefits all round. The engineer knows what he's doing. He goes straight to the thing. He has significantly better job satisfaction by having been trained to know what to do. The client gets better value for money because they're not paying by the hour for somebody that is constantly ringing back to the office trying to get advice, or ringing to the helplines trying to get advice. What do I do next? That's not the way to go around training people. You train them first, embed that with shadowing experienced engineers, and then they'll fledge by themselves. And every day's a school day. We all learn as we go along, and I'm still learning now, without a shadow of a doubt. Nobody gets to the finished, polished article, I can tell you. Ever. Yeah.
And I think what I love, though, is the fact that you do invest so much in your staff. Because there's some companies, it's like, there you go, we'll give you a bit of induction, that famous word, we'll give you a bit of induction, and then you can, just tottle off and make a start.
It's
That's daunting.
It is, yeah. And I think the way that we look at it is we want everybody to represent us as a family in the way in which we want to be represented. And so you can't do that unless you've trained them properly. And they all wear corporate clothing, and we make sure the vans are washed every week and all that sort of stuff for those that are customer facing. But that we don't overlook those that sit in the offices as well. So they'll have the opportunity for ILM, Institute of Learning Management courses, to levels 3, 5, 7, to whatever level they're comfortable with doing, to improve their particular job role and improve themselves. And not just for me to say, there's a big tick, you've got some experience in this role, but they've got a document in their hand that is a proper qualification that proves that they can actually do that. And of course they always come back and say, therefore I need more money. But that's life, that's the way it goes. But there's an escalation route that allows them to do that. And I think it's only right that people should be proud of what they're doing, and that they're doing it well, not struggling and not really understanding how they're doing things, because that doesn't work well for anybody.
No.
Whether it's the employer or the individual or the customer. The client needs to know they're getting value for money, and that's the way to do it.
What are some common misconceptions, do you think, that's around in your industry in particular, that you would like to just squash right away?
Yeah. I think it's often one of the big misconceptions is the cost of things like stair lifts. People think they're horrendously expensive and you couldn't possibly have them. There's lots of different routes in which to acquire a stair lift. If you genuinely need a stair lift, your GP or the occupational therapist will recommend that. There may well be that there is a route for a thing called a disabled facilities grant. So, to be fair, it's means tested. So there will be certain questions that you do need to answer. But that disabled facilities grant can pay for things like stair lifts or hoisting equipment or a level access shower or maybe a ramp to the door to get in and out with a mobility device. So they don't necessarily have to cost very much money at all to the individual. If, however, there's a wait and people do have the means, they're actually not as expensive as often people think. We'll be looking at being able to put in stair lift solutions for sometimes as little as £1,500.
Gosh.
And when you compare that to the alternative of, firstly, the risk of falling down the stairs, the risk of a hip fracture or worse at the bottom of a heap on the floor at the bottom of the stairs, £1,500 would be a bargain. But at the same time, it's a big saving to the things like the NHS. But also, if you consider moving house, firstly, even if you could find a bungalow, very few of them around, that are available for sale, but the cost of estate agents' fees and solicitors' fees and the moving expenses themselves would way outweigh the cost of a stair lift or a solution to keep you in your own home, where, of course, there is that infrastructure around you. Often your family are close by, the neighbours that you've known for years, the people that look in to make sure you're okay. Those things disappear when you move house, and you've got to start all over again. So often the cost of solutions isn't as high as people think. No. And there are very often ways in which assistance can be found to us to get that in place. Private funding is one, but there's finance options, there are charities, there are all manner of ways to make that happen. So all I'm really saying is people should not struggle.
No.
Really, if you're starting to have difficulty on moving around your own home, getting in and out of the bath, on and off of the toilet, for goodness sake, basic human functions, we have solutions.
Yeah.
We have solutions that can make it an awful lot easier. Don't suffer, because that's how accidents happen.
Welcome to TPG Disable Aids. Here, we don't just sell the products, we provide the solutions that enhance and improve your life.
At TPG Disable Aids, we believe that every customer's needs are unique. That's why we offer tailored assessments to ensure you find the right solution. From assessment to installation, we're with you every step of the way, ensuring your home remains accessible. Visit our showroom today or book your in-home assessment to find the right solution for you.
Now, I was speaking to you earlier, and one thing that I, loved with staffing is that you talked about your staff being assessors. And I think this is really important for people to know what that means.
The way that the process works, when somebody makes an inquiry, we send out an assessor, and some companies would call them salesmen. They're not salespeople. They are proper, qualified, trusted assessors. A trusted assessor is a qualification put together by the Disabled Living Foundation that trains them to be able to assess the holistic problem. So they're looking at all of these elements that come together to make those issues. And another crucial element from our point of view is these sales guys or assessors, they have no commissions. Nobody's on commission. They don't get paid a penny more if they sell product versus not selling product. It's irrelevant to them. They are in a position to be able to give you the best possible advice, to assess an overall solution. And if that solution means that it's right to bring in a more senior healthcare professional, then that is exactly what they will do. And they will have the contacts to bring in maybe an occupational therapist or a physiotherapist or social care almost, to bring in and signpost to the right places to make that happen. They're not sales guys. They call themselves the sales team. They're not.
They're the assessing team.
They really are. It's an assessment of need and then a provision of a solution rather than a sales process. And yes, obviously money changes hands when product changes hands. But that money changing hand may come from the local authority, may come from a housing association, not necessarily from the end user.
Exactly. The other thing that I need to point out is in your industry there are a lot of rogue traders.
Rather sadly, that is the case. There is a trade association that tries really, really hard to combat this, and it's the British Healthcare Trades Association, or the BHTA for short. That has a very strict code of practice that's underwritten by the Office of Fair Trading. Every member company signs up to that code of practice, and they are audited to that. So there will be secret shoppers, there will be telephone interviews, there'll be all sorts of things to go on to ensure that member companies really do comply with that code of practice. And we have been a member for right from the beginning, right from when we first started trading. I guess it's Dad's legacy again. He was very instrumental in the Agricultural Trade Association and was keen that we would be involved in the Healthcare Trade Association. I've taken an active role to make sure that it's guided in the right, morally upstanding, ethical direction that it should be. And unfortunately, sometimes member companies don't see the way that they're behaving as the best way for the end result for a disabled person, and they're either corrected and they change their behaviours, or they are removed from the association. It's one of those things that I think we all, again, we have a way in which we can trade, we can behave, we can hold ourselves in life, and to do things properly, to be ethical and upstanding in the way that you do things, it takes not a moment more time or effort than doing things in the wrong way. But my word, it can have make such a difference to those end users.
It can. And do you know one thing I was absolutely shocked at? This is some research that's come from the House of Commons Library just recently, Do you know 24% of the UK population is disabled? That's around about 16.1 million. Mm-hmm. And an estimated 20% has a visible disability, and that's 3.2 million. So that's all those people who could be going on the internet accidentally buying rogue products. I mean, how do you deal with someone, say, who has bought a product off the internet and then they realise it's not what it all seems, and then they come to you for help?
And rather sadly, that happens way too often. People will often buy on price. They'll buy a solution where they've read the leaflet or read the write-up on the internet and said, oh, that must be the thing for me. But they've not actually been assessed themselves by a healthcare professional as that being the correct solution. And very often they do buy inappropriate product. And I think one of our sort of issues with that is, in the first instance, do no harm. Because some of these products can actually cause further harm. So if somebody, for example, has maybe an aching back, a bad back, and they need a good supportive riser recliner chair, for example, you can buy them on the internet and it gets delivered to your driveway in a big box, and you better hope the neighbours will be there to help you bring it into the house. But it's never been measured and correctly assessed as being the correct and the appropriate size for your particular body. And so how can we possibly allow that to continue? My concern is that often people say that it's a medical device, and therefore the medical device there must be good. It's not good unless it's been assessed. When people do buy that type of product and they come to us and say, we're finding it's not working, we often say, well, have you tried Mr. Google? And see if he'll take it back from you, because we can't take it back. We didn't sell it to you in the first place. But what we can do is perhaps try and find a home for it where it is the appropriate equipment, and we can replace it with equipment that is appropriate. So we can get, in the case of things like riser recliner chairs, we can do a proper assessment. We can measure the size of the person that's going to use it, weigh them if needs be, do all of the things that are appropriate to make sure that they do have the correct chair. The arm height, for example, from the seat is correct, the width across it is correct. There's lots of elements to it which people really don't have knowledge about, and wouldn't rightfully have knowledge about. A chair is a chair is a chair. Well, of course, to those young, fit and able, of course a chair, we can sit on pretty much anything. It's just a bit to take the weight off. But if you're spending many, many hours a day in that type of chair, then it becomes far more important that it's correctly specified and is correctly tailored for your usage. It's a terrible shame. There's a lot of money wasted. And I think it rather sadly, there's some of the big sheds are starting to get involved in it as well. And we see some of the big high street players now having a small disability equipment range. And it worries me to death, because the 17-year-old spotty teenager that's doing it for a Saturday job in that shop has no knowledge at all about whether that product is going to be right for the end user. They're simply going to take the money over the till, and
they could do more damage.
We could do more harm, and that's the worry. If it's the inappropriate product in the inappropriate place, falls, trips, all sorts of things could occur if it's the wrong equipment. So whereas medical equipment that can be zero rated for VAT and all that is the right direction, I'm afraid there are no barriers to entry into the market as it stands at the moment, and regulation would probably upset more than it would actually solve. But it would make it an awful lot safer for many, many people.
Now, we've touched on some of the products that you you have in your company. And, I love that you've got such a wide range for a wide range of disabilities. And just being a cook myself and doing the recipes and food, I love that you have included in kitchen gadgets and things in there.
Yeah, and again, very, very important that we do. just to be clear, we don't actually manufacture anything, but what we have done is brought together as many different solutions as we possibly can. So in the cooking field, for example, somebody maybe with arthritis or a weakness of the limb, maybe even struggle to boil a kettle. So we have specific types of kettle that you never actually lift, that tilt on a frame, so you can boil the kettle and tilt it into your cup and it solves your problem. We have large handled cutlery that then is easier to grip for those with arthritic fingers. We have preparation tools with the same sort of grip, so peelers and graters and things that you can use that make it possible to do things. Even turning the idea on its head and saying, instead of you trying to hold the grater and then move the vegetable against it, then have it as a board on the surface and only move one item, just a vegetable. So there's lots of ways in which you can still accommodate the desired end outcome, but thinking about it laterally and doing it in a slightly different way. And again, this goes back to what we were saying earlier. There's an awful lot of lack of knowledge of what is out there and what is available, and how do you put into the Amazon or Mr. Google search engine, I want to peel my potatoes. It's going to not come up with all sorts of rubbish.
It totally does. It's a minefield.
Whereas we have brought a lot of that stuff together. We do a mail order catalogue that potentially will help, but often we won't sell through mail order or online with equipment that needs any type of assessment. So again, people will see the ideas there, but we'll need to speak and assess their needs and their capabilities before actually supplying some of that equipment.
Just going back to the business side of it now with yourself, has there ever been a moment where you said, that's it, I've had enough, I'm not doing any more of this, not another day?
Several times. I don't think anybody in business, if they're really, really honest, has never got to that point. But I think sometimes you have to take a step back. You have to look at the bigger picture and say, and certainly from my point of view, we've touched the lives of many thousands of people in what we do now. We've put something in the region of 1,000 stair lifts a year we install now for people. The hoisting equipment for the severely disabled that lifts them out of bed and puts them into their wheelchair for the day and things like that. We wouldn't have been able to benefit and assist those people if we hadn't been there. And then some of them come back to us and say, oh my word, you've made such a difference to my life. And so if you have those bad days where you maybe have had some staff trouble or vans have broken down or something's happened or Inland Revenue have a moment, you wake up the following morning and say, no, we need to work our way through this and get this right. And invariably we do. And I think if we're really honest, there's nobody in business has ever had it completely plain sailing from day one to now. You have challenges, and I think the mark of a quality business is how you handle those challenges. You have to do it properly. You have to work your way through. As Confucius will often say, a journey of 1,000 miles is one step at a time. And you do need to take those individual steps.
You make a cup of tea, you get your broad shoulders or your big pants on, and you...
Well, this is a phrase we often use. Pull on your big boy pants, get on with it. You have to have a way through these things. It is not just going and sitting in a corner and crying, because that isn't actually going to help anybody. We need to find ways to solve it, not just for ourselves, but for our clients that are already out there. You can't walk away and close a business and say all those thousands of stair lifts or hoists or mobility products well, what are they going to do now?
I was just about to say, can you imagine it? I can't ever imagine you leaving this business. I think you will do probably one day, but it's like I imagine you at about 100 if you're still going. They'll be wheeling you in. Here comes Alastair.
And I think Dad was in exactly the same place, and I think he was way past retirement age before he eventually we could elbow him out through the door and say, come on, please, you need to start to enjoy some of your fruits of the labour and let me take on, and my sister likewise. So it's a thing that gets under your skin. It's a lifestyle. It's not, I think, an industry that you can necessarily just be employed and it not affect you in any way.
Yeah.
We see so many, sometimes very sad cases, where an individual perhaps has been on a made-up bed in the living room and using a commode downstairs, sometimes for years. And simply with the installation of a stair lift, we can get them back upstairs, using the whole of the house again, their own bedroom. You know, to realise that there is a bathroom up there, they don't have to use a commode and a strip wash. And
they get their dignity back, don't they?
And it really, really is a satisfying industry to be in, to be able to get that. And so, I think it's one of those industries that, no, it's not a 9 to 5 thing.
No.
You have to have an empathy with it. And those that have a longevity and a success in this industry, they absolutely do have that empathy with what we're achieving.
Well, Alastair, we're now coming to the quick fire question round. I know they all love this. They actually do love it. But I want to know, what's the most popular piece of equipment you make? What do you think you sell the most of?
I think without a shadow of a doubt, it is stair lifts. It is stair lifts day in, day out. Because it has the biggest impact. And it's not the one thing that maybe many high street shops can't just literally walk into and say, I'm going to sell stair lifts, because you do have to commit to doing it absolutely properly. And I would always advise anybody that's looking to buy a stair lift, think about after the sale. So is there going to be a service engineer available? Not just today and tomorrow, but 7 days a week. You don't stop using it at the weekends. And if there should happen, and let's face it, everything that's electrical and mechanical has the opportunity to let you down. That's just life. If it should let you down on a Saturday lunchtime, you're still going to want to go to bed Saturday evening.
Oh, yeah.
And so is an available engineer going to be able to come out and resolve that for you? Or is there a way in which you can have a contingency plan to sort that out? So stair lift changes so many lives, but it not only does it make life more fulfilling and an easier route for many that have them, it prevents far more accidents, because we see time and again people fall down the stairs, and it's that moment that triggers them into actually doing something about it. Well, rather sadly, some of them don't come through having fallen down the stairs.
No.
So let's avoid it in the first place.
Yeah.
To break the neck of femur and be in a heap at the bottom of the stairs can actually be terminal for many. So let's not let that happen. Let's have the prevention in place before it needs to be a dire emergency. Yeah.
What's the smallest piece of equipment that you sell that's had a great impact?
The smallest, my word. I think the simplest is just grab rails. Appropriate use and securely fixed grab rail in maybe the bathroom scenario, or even when somebody's just dressing and they feel unstable because they're trying to lift one foot and pull on the trousers, that sort of thing. It just is a stability item, and it can only be 3 or 4 pounds, and it's securely fixed in place, and it can solve a whole load of problems. I think likewise things like the pickup grabs and reachers. Again, yes, they're good for picking up litter, but they're actually quite good for pulling up your socks and pulling on your jacket and all manner of things, because you can adapt and use them in a very flexible way.
You see, that's one thing that my husband over there, he's always saying, give us a hand with me socks. I think I found a new Christmas gift.
Well, without a shadow of a doubt, as us gentlemen get older, I think we all find that our jackets get smaller whilst they're hanging in the wardrobe, and our feet always get further away with years.
Well, do you know what? I definitely think that's on his Christmas list. Anyway, if you could sit with a disability minister for one day, what would you say to them? Because I think the whole thing with the government and disability at the minute needs a proper shake-up.
I would have to agree with you. And I think my biggest concern is that I see billions being thrown at some areas of poorly managed NHS, where a fraction of that in prevention and equipment to prevent slip, trips and falls, a bigger disabled facilities grant budget that then could be spent in such a way that stops people becoming customers of the NHS.
Yeah, exactly.
It was interesting, through the British Healthcare Trades Association several years ago, we did a study using the London School of Economics, and that highlighted that for every £1 spent on preventative measures, and that might be a ramp to the front door, it might be a grab rail, it might be a level access shower, and it might be a stair lift. For every £1 spent in that, it would save at least £3 cost to the NHS. So it's 3 times benefit. Spend £1 billion into the disabled facilities and save £3 billion on the NHS budget. It can become very big numbers, and I think the penny pinching, the cutting of services needs to be in the right place, not in places where it's having a significant impact, not just on finances, but on the pure day-to-day living, the pain, the anxiety, the angst of those individuals that are affected by those falls and those injuries that could well have been prevented.
Well, Alastair, thank you so much for coming in. I mean, it's just been so insightful. And I think that if there's anybody out there now and they're looking for disabled aids for themselves or their family, don't suffer in silence. Get yourself proper, accredited advice and help. Alastair, thank you again.
More than welcome.
I hope one day you can pop over and do another one, because I think we've just scratched the surface with this one, and no doubt I'll see you with more different equipment that you produce.
Well, I'm always of the opinion that nobody ultimately escapes the services. And you've mentioned your husband needing trouble with his socks. There may be times that his mobility needs extra assistance. So I'm sure we can be here to help, give advice.
That's a good thing to know, Alastair. A good thing to know.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for the opportunity.